Thousands of years ago, our human ancestors used to live a nomadic lifestyle, pursuing sources for food and water, hunting after animals and always searching for a self-shelter. Nomadism was a vital survival strategy for early humans who relied on seasonal and climatic fluctuations and were forced to adapt to nature's whims. Almost every civilization around the world had its origin in some form of this hunter-gatherer or pastoral lifestyle. Major nomadic empires rose to power and conquered vast amounts of land, but those empires fell eventually and moved on to a society of permanent settlement and agriculture. But to this day, there are still many peoples left who wander from place to place and practice this nomadic lifestyle, just in a much smaller extent. There are literally hundreds of people groups that we could talk about, from the hunter-gatherer tribe of the Haddad people in Africa, to the semi-nomadic Sami of northern Scandinavia, or even modern people groups like nomadic workers in North America. This alone shows that there are many different ways to define nomads and to distinguish nomadic lifestyles. But in this video I want to focus on one of them, the Bedouin people of Jordan.
One short disclaimer ahead: the term Bedouin is a rather broad description of nomadic people living in Arabia. It comes from the word Badia, which means desert. For the sake of simplicity, I will say Bedouin when talking about countless tribes, clans and families that consider themselves nomadic. Okay, let's continue.
Today's population of Jordan has lived as a modern society for a long time now, in the sprawling capital of Amman and plenty other bigger cities. But far away from the green and arable land up north, in the vast deserts in the south and east of the country, there are no such established urban areas. This is the land which the Bedouins call their home. The Bedouins have lived here for thousands of years. Those pastoralist people were the first to be locally referred as Arab, which is obviously the origin of today's name of the region. Even though big Arabian conquests happened and civilizations formed, the link to a nomadic lifestyle never disappeared. To keep Jordan's history brief and very simple, after the introduction of Islam came the Ottoman Empire, which was followed by a sprinkle of European imperialism and the formation of today's Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Nomadic tribes used to live all over today's territory of Jordan. But with changing times and modern inventions, more and more Bedouins left the desert for cities and pursued different lifestyles. Today, Bedouin tribes are scattered around the country in various locations and rather small communities. The Bedouins are considered a pastoral people. This means that traditionally, in the search for water and feeding grounds for their livestock, Bedouins wandered from place to place. The nomadic lifestyle is especially predominant in this region because of the harsh and arid climate that forces a lot of migration. Essential to endure extreme heat and drought are the Wadis, seasonal water flows that can turn a dry canyon into a rushing stream. The Bedouins call the desert their home and know it better than anyone else, setting up new camps along the way, not bothered by the modern concept of borders. They sleep under the starlit sky on their goat-haired beds and smoke their water pipes. At least, this is the romanticized way of looking at it and how it is presented in some movies. But is this how they live today in modern times? There are still tribes that practice their traditional nomadic lifestyle of traveling from place to place. They live mainly in the vast desert plains of Badia in eastern Jordan. From the over 11 million people living in Jordan, at least 1.3 million identify as Bedouin, but no more than 40,000 can be attributed to this truly nomadic way of living.
The majority of Bedouin people in Jordan already semi-settled or gave up their migrating tradition completely. One primary example is the settlement of Sayun, near the World Heritage Site of Petra. Living here are Bedouin who earn money in the daily buzzing tourism industry in the ancient rock-carved city. Petra's history reaches back millennia and Bedouins have also been part of it. It was rediscovered by a Swiss explorer in 1812. The guy literally gave himself an Arabic name, dressed up as a pilgrim, and then tricked a local guide to show him the ancient site. About 1,000 Bedouins were living there in Petra. And they kept living there in tents and caves until it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985, when they were driven out by the government and resettled. About 150 of them refused and stayed in Petra until this day.
The temple's interior is scarcely more than a cave, but El Khazna's exterior remains an astonishing symbol of late Hellenistic design.
The Bedouin life has never been easy. Having to endure the scorching heat of the day and the cold desert nights, always in a hustle to find enough food and water for your livestock and family. Modern urbanization and inventions were too tempting to just dismiss, and the majority of the indigenous population of Jordan were looking forward to the convenience it brings with it. So there's nothing unusual or non-authentic about seeing a Bedouin man talking into a cell phone and riding a four-wheel truck instead of his camel.
But one of the most affecting aspects of a modern world is the tourism industry. As mentioned before, interacting with tourists is a major part in the life of many Bedouins in Jordan today. Since Jordan is one of the few countries in the Middle East with next to no oil reserves, tourism is one of the most important aspects of the country's economy and its biggest export sector. Almost 5 million tourists visited Jordan in 2018, exploring the many cultural and natural landmarks. The primary spots where Bedouins are especially involved in tourism are Petra, of course, and the Wadi protected area. In Petra alone, they are facing up to 1 million tourists per year. Numbers have declined since the pandemic, but are again on the rise.
Tourism brings some positive aspects with it, like a steady income, increased wealth and better infrastructure. But when talking to Bedouins in those places, researchers concluded a lot of negative aspects that the tourism industry brings with it. Social bonds get weaker and people tend to be more money-oriented. A totally new form of competition arose with tourists visiting, and vendors, guides and hosts fight fiercely for every paying customer.
Every year, new desert accommodations pop up and offer the next best Bedouin experience, under the starlit sky of the Arabian night. Besides local competition, Bedouin hosts also must fear the increasing numbers of international investors that construct luxury desert temples. Bedouin children and teenagers rather earn money and provide for their family than going to school. This results in huge school dropout rates for the youth. Around 60% of Jordanians over the age of 15 have only a primary education or less. It is estimated that hundreds of children work inside of Petra, as horse guides, vendors and waiters.
Especially older members of the Bedouin community notice changes in religious belief and traditional demeanor. Drinking alcohol, dating foreign women, swearing in English or refraining from wearing traditional clothes. This is nothing bad per se, but shows that cultures are steadily changing. However, the Bedouin culture can lose a lot of its unique heritage and interfere with its fundamental role in the Middle East. It's a two-edged sword. Many Bedouins value their long-standing customs of hospitality and welcome the tourists. They are proud of their land and want to show it to outsiders and tell them about the nomadic lifestyle. With the earned money, they can live a comfortable life and buy the things they want and need.
On the other hand, some Bedouins feel pressured and fear a loss of traditional values. The nomadic life gets harder and harder every year, with climate change being one of the biggest contributors for that. For some, tourism is the only option left to make a living and feed their families. But there are some ways to let Bedouins coexist with modern tourism. Tourism itself is not the problem, rather it's the tourism industry. Too many visitors, too much demand, too many ramifications on human and natural resources.
One way to fix this is with ecotourism, a sustainable way of experiencing a country with a controlled number of visitors and cooperation with local indigenous operators. A preservation of social qualities and respect to natural limitations. But a fundamental pillar of this is still a complete, continuous and available form of education. Not only for the Bedouin youth to stand independently in their path for the future, but also for both locals and foreigners to expand their perspectives on intercultural exchange. The Bedouins are to this day an integral part of the country's social structure and national identity, even beyond the state borders. Even though the government made some unilateral decisions in the past, it is said that the Bedouins have good relations with the ruling monarchs, and they themselves describe the Bedouins as the backbone of the country.
Even though the times of nomadism as a lifestyle is over, and Bedouins no longer depend on raiding other groups or the search for water, their tribal mindset and the fundamental tenets of the original desert dwellers are not lost. Their hospitality and generosity, their humor and free mindset is deep within their blood and will persist for generations to come.